Feinsand covers the Yankees and covers baseball for MLB.com, and I don't know if anybody else, maybe somebody else. Is that it, or is there somebody else too?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Full-time MLB.com.
All right. So right now, as the season ends and we get into the watch time now that Cash can speak and everything's back to normal, give me the 5 guys who you think are the candidates for the Yankee job. Give me 5. If you think you can do it in 3, give me 3. If you need 5, give me 5.
5. Let's see.
Well, give me 3 if you want to give me 3. If you like 3.
Jerry Harrison Jr. is definitely a candidate.
I've heard that name a lot. I've heard that name a lot.
Sure.
Why is he such a candidate?
I think he's a bright guy. I think they liked him when he played for the Yankees. He was on that 2009 championship team. Kind of a gritty player, young. I think they think he can relate to players, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing in this search, Mike, is, like most of these general managers and front offices now, they're going to dictate a lot of what happens on the field. And so a manager's biggest 2 jobs are going to be relating with the players and sort of managing the egos in the clubhouse and dealing with the media. And beyond that, they're going to have to, I don't know if
they're going to have to take their marching orders from upstairs.
They're going to have to take their marching orders.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Which one do you think was a bigger thing for Girardi? Do you think it was more him chafing at them wanting more of them wanting to send the message from above and manage from above, or do you think it was more that the players and he had problems? We know he had problems with the star players, the Posada, Teixeira, Jeter players. We also know he had some problems with a couple of the young players, including Sanchez. Is it more him and the players, or it was more him and Cashman? I
think it was more him and the players, but I think there was probably a faction of him and Cashman as well. But I think it was the players more than anything. I think, you look at the young core they have and seeing how he related with all the, a lot of the veteran guys, and I just think as this young core comes up, they don't want that to become the issue again with the next group. And, Joe wore his emotions on his face, and he looked stressed out all the time. And I just don't think you want to put that kind of additional pressure on guys who already have plenty of pressure on them.
All right, so we got Jerry Hairston Jr., number 1. Number 2 is?
I think Raul Ibanez is going to get a look.
Well, why is Raul Ibanez popular?
Sort of the same theory as
same
Hairston.
Thing? Okay.
Really, really well-liked guy.
Right. Good, very good guy, as we know. Very good guy. Very good old hitter, and a very good guy, yes.
And played recently enough that, you can relate to the current modern-day player. I don't get the sense that, that they're looking at anybody who hasn't been around recently. This is...
so that means all the Yankee coaches are out, and that means all the guys, any of the older guys are out, and anybody who's been around a long time is out.
I would think.
Okay.
Just based on sort of, casual conversations I've had with people.
Is the third name Jay Bell? Is he an issue?
I think the fact that he's in the organization, he'll get a look as well, but I don't think they're locked into somebody who's in the organization. Now, that said, I think it will be somebody who has a tie somehow, and it's somebody who Cashman knows and knows that he'll be able to have a good working relationship with because, as we said, Cashman wants this manager to essentially take marching orders as every other, most other GMs in the sport do at this point. So that doesn't make him, any different than most of the others. We just saw 2 teams that their front offices are certainly very overwhelming in terms of their impact in the World Series. So, Jay Bell will certainly get a look. I still think Rob Thompson is a candidate, but it just doesn't sound like. It just doesn't sound. I thought at the beginning that he was sort of the front runner right away. But the more that it's gone on, the more you talk to people, it just doesn't sound like that's the direction they're going to go.
Now, you can make a case that someone should have major league experience if they come to the Yankees, dealing with the New York media, being the Yankee manager, dealing with stars, dealing with the pressures of the Yankees, dealing with the number of media in New York, the fact that you're the number 1 franchise in the sport. They seem to dismiss that. It's almost like they want to groom a guy rather than have someone come in with that experience. So they're pretty much dismissing that. The guy they name is probably not going to have had major league experience, right?
Yeah, no, that seems likely. And, but I think the one thing that, for instance, Hairston and Ibanez both have in common is that they played for the Yankees. So they understand the media landscape here. they've both been around the Dodgers now, so they understand, that's the number 2 market in the country. So it's not like they'd be coming here from having hung around, Kansas City for a year or two. So I think they both understand what a big media landscape is all about. They've both been here and understand what the New York landscape is about. So I don't think that's why I think it's somebody who will have had a tie to the Yankees and to Cashman at some point, because you're not going to bring in somebody who's never experienced New York, and what the Yankees are firsthand and say, go get them.
Gotcha. So we got Hairston, we got Ibanez, and now I mentioned Bell. Your third guy would be whom? Or you don't have a third guy?
I don't have a really obvious third. See, that's the thing about
so you think it's one of those two guys?
I think Bell and Thompson are certainly sort of in the distant mix. It wouldn't surprise me if either of those guys ended up emerging. But
have you heard any crazy names?
You've heard the same crazy names I have, A-Rod and all that.
Oh, no. I mean, really names they might consider. A-Rod's not going to manage it.
No, the one thing that they've kept this really well under wraps, so there's been no leaking, there's been no, hey, get this guy's name out here, get this guy, Pete Buchanan's name was out there for a while, but I don't think that's
Brad
really
Ausmus, you don't think is a candidate, right?
I don't, the fact that Brad Ausmus was the runner-up, essentially, in the Red Sox managerial search, that's a bad look for the Yankees to take the guy the Red Sox didn't want. So I don't think Ausmus, plus he doesn't have the ties to New York, whereas, he would have made sense in Boston if Alex Cora had gone elsewhere because, Dombrowski obviously hired him in Detroit. But I don't think Brad Ausmus, he wasn't very impressive in Detroit. Hard for me to believe that's the guy that Cashman's going to make his hire.
Talking with Mark Feinsand. The other thing is Dave Eiland becomes the guy you know well. It becomes the Met pitching coach. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dave's a really good pitching coach. And I know he had his personal issues with the Yankees that led to his departure here. But, he did a good job here. They won a World Series with him as a pitching coach.
Now, let's be fair. Without going into any details, let's just tell the folks that Dave Eiland left here because he had some problems in his life, not because anything to do with baseball.
Correct. Personal problems.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there was never a question that he was a good pitching coach. He went to Kansas City and helped build that team back into a contender and into a world champion. So, I like the move for the Mets. I think he's a guy who may be able to light a fire under some of these guys and help turn that rotation around. Obviously, with him and Callaway, they've brought in 2 very strong pitching guys to try to turn this rotation. Because look, we all know the Mets rotation is what they're going to live or die with. So, if these 2 guys can get together and figure out a way to get the best out of that group, well, that could be a really good thing for the Mets.
Will the Yankees keep will they keep the Tony Peñas of the world on their staff?
I think Tony is a guy who could come back, depending on who the manager is. He would be a strong bench coach for a young manager who hasn't done it before. And I think if you look at a guy like Hairston or Ibanez who hasn't managed, you have to put a strong bench coach next to them. So I could see Tony being that kind of guy. Joe Espada took the job with the Astros as Alex Cora's replacement as their bench coach, so he's gone. I don't know what the situation with the hitting coach is. There's been rumors that Kevin Long could come back, which would be very surprising to me, just given that he was fired here.
He's had some run-ins with Cashman. I don't know if that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to happen either. Yeah. But Kevin will find a spot somewhere because he's a very good hitting coach and very good at what he does.
Yeah, guys, and he's got a lot of big stars who rave about him, like A-Rod and Murphy and guys like that who rave about him. Yeah.
But so I think you're going to see some turnover. The one guy I'm most interested in seeing is Larry Rothschild, whether he comes back.
You got to keep him.
I would think you'd have to.
That's a big loss. Now, if they bring in a Hairston or an Ibanez, fine. If they lose the pitching coach, that is a huge loss for the Yankees. That guy's really good.
I agree. I thought it was interesting that they released them all from their contracts to go to, and gave all the teams permission to talk to everybody. Now, that could have been.
I'm surprised he hasn't gotten a job already then.
Unless Cashman has told him, just hang tight, you're staying here, and they have a deal already, but they can't announce anything until a new manager comes. Until they hire the manager.
I would be surprised if he left.
Signed right now.
I would be surprised if he left. I really would.
No, I would be too, and I think the Yankees like him and everything he brings to the table. So I could see Tony Peña, and I could see Rothschild sticking around. Thompson, I don't know if he gets passed over for the shot at the manager job. maybe he doesn't. So I'm not sure, but I think you'll see some of the coaching staff remain, and whoever they hire will probably, be allowed to bring in one or two of his own coaches, much the way that, Girardi did when he first got hired. He brought in Mike Harkey and Bobby Meacham, and the rest of it was either a holdover staff or Dave Island was promoted from AAA, and that was not, they were not Joe's guys.
All right, we're talking with Mark Feinsand about the Yankee managerial job and some other things. Joe Girardi now is out there. Joe, Washington admitted, they said, we're not paying a high-priced manager, so that was out. He got in late on other jobs which weren't available. So right now, there really isn't a job there for him. He can go do TV again, which he did. So do you see Girardi just sitting and waiting for the next round of the jobs to open up?
Yeah, I think he takes this year either doing TV or maybe going to do some work with the commissioner's office, which he's talked about before. And then a year from now, when jobs open up, the next round of firing.
Now, Joe's managed for 11 years. Do you think he still wants to manage? He has been a manager for a long time. So
I do. I think he does. He's 53 years old. I don't think he's ready to hang it up. I think certainly the way that this ended for him in New York will leave a bad taste in his mouth, and I think he'll want to go do it again somewhere and try to win elsewhere. The one that people keep to, his family's in South Florida, maybe he'll end up with the Marlins. There is no chance that he ends up managing the Marlins.
No. Listen, as you know, he and Jeter are not friendly.
I mean,
so,
zero chance.
Zero.
So,
I've told people that there's zero. That's a zero. Yes.
The same chance he ends up there is the same chance Mattingly ends up here.
Right.
So,
exactly. So zero on that one. Jeter and Posada were not Girardi guys. I mean, so and how about Teixeira coming out and knocking Girardi, huh?
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. And I
think Mark's in the wrong. Listen, he can say what he wants. Mark was hurt a lot the last couple of years. He has no complaint.
No, absolutely. Mark did. Mark had a good run at the beginning of his time here, and then sort of limped down the stretch. But but the things that Teixeira said about Girardi aren't things that really surprised anybody.
I agree.
If you've been around the team, you've heard the same type of stuff. I mean, just think about the first year when you had guys like Mike Mussina, in 08, talking about, I'm a 40-year-old man and I'm being treated like a child.
Right.
And, the personality, the personal touch with the guys was never quite there. They always respected Joe's work ethic. They respected his baseball knowledge and his intensity, but there was never that personal touch.
No, he's the anti-Tory. He doesn't have the warmth.
Yeah, and you know what? That was one of the knocks against Sean Farrell in Boston too. Was that he didn't, the players didn't feel comfortable just going into his office to talk to him or to sit down and shoot the breeze. And Alex Cora is the antithesis of that.
And that's what a Tory and Francona have in bundles. Yeah,
and that's where I think you look at guys like Dave Roberts, and that the Yankees potentially would look at a guy like Ibanez or a guy like Hairston and say that would be a strength of his. We can take care of the baseball side.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting. Fans keep calling about Tanaka. They're fascinated by this. I can't see any way Tanaka opts out. I cannot see it unless somebody's got a blank check. I mean, the guy's going to get 22 change for the next 3 years. How is he going to beat that deal?
I agreed with you all along, except he had a really good postseason, and guys get big eyes and think there's stuff out there. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen here, and I've thought this for a while, is the same thing that happened with CeCe 5 years ago, the same thing that happened with Justin Upton today, where they just tack on a year at the end of the deal. You don't have to sign him to a whole big 5, 6, 7 year deal, but you give him a fourth year, or you give him, maybe a fourth year option based on innings pitched to make sure he stays healthy. I think he'll stay here, and he'll use that opt-out clause to leverage himself an extra something, whether it's a year or a little more money or something like that. But I don't think he's going to opt out into clear free agency, because unless they've done another MRI, unless his agent did another MRI of that elbow and can show every team, look, it's exactly the same as it was 3 years ago, and there's no problem with it. That's a really dangerous waters to go floating upon,
I totally agree. What else? What'd you take out of the World Series?
Two really good teams. It was a really interesting series, some crazy games. Way too much talk about the baseball, especially given that you had some really well-pitched games in the series as well. I mean, we're all talking about how nobody can throw a slider and pitchers can't get outs. And, there was a 2.5-hour game one that featured two pitchers who pitched really well.
And last night, Morton again came up big. And
you had another game where there was one hit in the whole game through 5 innings. Look, home runs are a part of the game now. There were more home runs hit this year than ever before in the history of baseball, and it was only appropriate that you had that game 2 and that game 5 because those were kind of blips of things we saw all year. But the Astros were really good. They've got that, the great young core of players that, with Altuve and Springer and Correa and Bregman. That's a team that's not going anywhere for a while. And, the Dodgers they're going to be back and they're going to be strong, but I think, that Astros team is a really scary one going forward if you're in the American League.
How much do you think Darvish hurt himself? How much is there a lingering impact for free agency off those two performances?
I think the biggest area he hurts himself there is that the Dodgers are now out as far as a
right,
team
they can't bring him back. Right.
They can't bring him back.
He's a goat. He can't come back.
And that's a team that has a ton of money and certainly could have been one of the big spenders to bring him back had he pitched well. So I think that's where he hurts himself the most. He's still going to get a lot of money. He's still a good pitcher. If it turns out, we heard some whispers last night that maybe he was tipping his pitches and
they say every time somebody gets hit, they say that though.
That's true. But if that is true and they figure that out and they say, that's why he was getting knocked around, he's gonna, he'll get more money than any pitcher on the market this winter, I would think. So even with those two performances, I just think the biggest impact is it takes the Dodgers out of the mix.
Talking about Mark Feinsand as we kind of put a ribbon on the baseball season for this year as we go forward, and as far as big moves. What's the big move that you're expecting? Where's the big player who's going to get moved? Where's the big free agent signing? What's going to be the headline of this off season here?
Well, the biggest names that we're looking at, J.D. Martinez made himself a lot of money this year, with what he did in Arizona, and he is the biggest free agent position player out there. A lot of teams need that pop, and I think, you look at him, you look at some of the other bats are out there. I think the Red Sox are the team that need to go out and add
They need a fifth or a fourth hitter.
Bat.
I agree.
They need a cleanup hitter.
They do.
And knowing that the Yankees are now...
If I were them, I know this is crazy, but I said it last year, and I think you could breathe life into him a la Verlander. If I were them, I'd get Cabrera and make him the DH.
It's an interesting thought. He's owed a lot of money.
I know he's got money coming, but I think in that park and in that atmosphere, he would really get rekindled, and he could carry a team for a couple of years.
I think the one name that we're going to hear constantly until something happens, obviously, is going to be Stanton. Jeter's made it clear that
he's going to trade him.
He's going to trade him. So,
I think he goes to the Phillies.
The Phillies, the only question there is, do you trade that guy in the division where you're going to have to see him 18 times a year?
Because I don't think, unless the Red Sox take him, and somebody told me they wouldn't. I asked somebody who should know, and they said the Red Sox wouldn't go near that contract.
Yeah, the other team I think that could really be in the mix for him is the Giants. They need offense desperately.
That makes sense.
And they have money. They have a hole in the outfield. I think the Giants are the team that I could see most likely landing Stanton. But I think there are some, it's not a really deep free agent class, but it's pretty top heavy. And you look at guys like, Martinez, Carlos Santana, Darvish, Arrieta, Moustakas, Hosmer. Hosmer is going to get a ton of money this winter. And I'm interested to see what the Royals do because they're basically their whole core is now a free agent. So does this start a rebuild for them? Do they try to bring in some guys?
Where does Bruce go? You think he goes back to the Indians?
I wouldn't be surprised. He was a really good fit there.
I know he's not coming back to the Mets, I can tell you that.
I think the Indians may be resigned to losing Santana, so Bruce would certainly help fill the loss of Santana in their lineup.
Who was the big loser this year? Do you think it was the Indians because of how good they were down the stretch? In terms of just disappointing in the postseason or not reaching, you could say Washington again fell short.
I was going to say Washington to me is maybe more of a disappointment than Cleveland, just because they were better than the Cubs. They were a better team, I think, and they had that series. They should have won it. The Indians were a great team, but their record, as great as their record was, it took a 22-game winning streak for them to have that record.
Right.
Were they really a 102, 103 win team? I don't know. they may have been a 95-win team that went on this crazy epic run and got themselves up to that next level.
And a couple of people I trust told me that you guys can do what you want with it, but Kluber was hurt in the postseason. They said he was
dead,
and they said that's why he didn't pitch game one. And they said he was, and I trust the people who told me. They said Kluber was absolutely hurt. He had a bad back in this, and that's the only reason why he didn't pitch game one.
Yeah, there was talk about that.
He was hurt. They said so. So I mean, I'll believe them because they swore that it was true.
I think Washington might be the biggest disappointment for the fact that there's a tight window there. They understand that they probably have one more year with Bryce Harper, and then
who's going to afford him?
Somebody will, Mike. They always do.
I mean he's going to want a ton of money.
He's going to want a ton of money, but he'll take whatever the most he can get is going to be.
But they have a lot of money there.
They do. But would it surprise you if the Yankees signed Bryce Harper?
It would now because they have so much offense that they have under control. Why would they go buy somebody at that price? Well, they have a right fielder hit 50 home runs. They don't need a right fielder.
That's true. I think Machado's a better fit for the Yankees anyway.
But how good is Gleyber Torres? He might be great.
Well, but he may be the second baseman.
Okay,
so.
And they got Andujar too, right? He's a good player, right?
He's a good prospect. I don't know if he's quite.
He might not be Manny Machado. I understand
he also
that.
might be. The other thing is, at some point they're going to have to probably bring in another pitcher here,
right.
And they may need to use some of those prospects. Not Gleyber Torres, but maybe an Andujar, somebody like that.
And Didi's going to get a bunch of money too.
Didi's going to get a lot of money. I don't see Castro being a long-term part of the plan, which is why I think Torres takes over at second base.
I agree with that.
And Machado ends up. Remember,
do you think they can move Ellsbury in any way? Can they do anything? I guess they could pay 90 cents on the dollar, but other than that, can they move Ellsbury anywhere?
I think if you pay 50 cents on the dollar, you can probably move him. For a $10 million a year player, he's still going to be worth something to somebody. And, I look at a team like Kansas City who's losing half their roster, or somebody like that, and say, you know what, Ellsbury for $10 million, you put him out there.
Well, if you're the Yankees, you do that now. You have to get him off the roster.
I think that happens this winter. I think they eat what they have to eat to get rid of him going into next year where you've got Gardner, Hicks, Frazier, Judge as your four outfielders. I just don't. He's clogging the lane, so to speak, and I don't think he's on this roster by spring training.
I don't think there's any question. Well, thanks very much for your stuff. Appreciate you very much for your hopping on. Thank you.
Anytime, Mike.
All right, Mark Feinsand back.